From Geppetto Studios in New Freedom, Pennsylvania, welcome to the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast, your home for inclusive, positive geek culture, where we talk about movies, comics, music, books, and whatever else we feel like. Please welcome your host.
It's not Dr. Mendenhall.
Brad Mendenhall.
Hey kids, it is episode 223 of the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast. Comic book artist and creator Jason Lenox returns to talk about the Kickstarter campaign for issue 4 of Lords of the Cosmos. The Kickstarter has been so successful that he's already met his goal, but you can still support Jason because no one ever has too much money, right? Anywho, Katie has a question.
What fictitious setting in a TV show or movie would you want to live in?
I think we pretty much answered this when the last time Katie and the rest of the amazing friends were together, but it's still a good question. And also, I have a different answer this time. Last time I answered I wanted to live in the New York city of Friends, but again, as same with last episode, I guess I'm just in a comic book mood. I want to live in Superman's Metropolis because while Gotham City in the DC universe was very dark and crime-riddled and crime-infested and you know, just so much, just like a desolate place, Metropolis was always sort of presented as like the flipped coin of that, where it was beautiful infrastructure, no crime. Superman was there, so you know, which always seemed unfair as bank robbers versus the guy who's invulnerable to bullets. Often it was just presented as like this really beautiful, with some neat architecture, very futuristic, which isn't always my favorite. Architecture-wise, I like older buildings, but there was something just very cool and beautiful and clean about Metropolis. So, yeah, I'll say Metropolis.
I'm doing good. Was the last time I saw you when we were down in Philadelphia?
Last time I saw you, it was not too long after Philadelphia, because then you were at Baltimore.
Yes.
We did a podcast after that.
Yeah, it's so weird because I guess I forgot how much shows help me keep track of time organically, and now it's just out.
On an average year, how many cons would you do?
The answer to your question, I would say, would be about 14. Now, some of those might just be like little kind of like afternoon type things, like kind of multi-day ones, probably 10, and then maybe 4 like little free comic book day, library day, things like that. So you've just had a bunch of weekends opened up, and that might suck. I'm trying to use the time to get stuff done, which is kind of fun. Like you get used to doing them, so you feel bad or guilty. Like you're not, you need to be there. And like now it's like now we're not going. And I had a couple that had rebooked for like the first quarter of this year, and literally today was like, hey, pushing it back to November. Hey, pushing it back to 2022. So even the ones that are quote on my schedule are all they're all just falling away. I think that scene is I mean I don't know. It'll come back. I don't know what it's going to look like when it does.
When you and I first met, we met because you sort of ran your own Comic-Con in Penn State.
Yeah, we had Old NittyCon going for a while. Yeah.
We talked a lot about how cons have changed so much from when we were younger, because I remember the first ones I went to were in King of Prussia, PA. Every other month they would have one, and it was just a hotel that would rent out some space, and there was a bunch of boxes so you could buy. And I was a young kid. I was a new comic book fan, so it was great because I could go and just go to the nickel bin or the dime bin and buy just a bunch of stuff. And they would have some artists there. And you and I talked about this, going to a Comic-Con where you would have TV celebrities, and then there'd be somebody selling LASIK eye surgery.
Yeah.
When you were running the Penn State show, you didn't want it to be that. You wanted to go a little bit more back to what it had been, the shows you and I went to. And there would still be writers and artists, but it was a Comic-Con for people who were comic book fans.
I think comic books, shame on me, are a little bit like baseball cards. I don't think that they'll ever have that innocent youth appeal that they did in a more analog, simplistic era. I think all those hobbies are kind of collectively changing into other things. I mean, if you just look how we're consuming media, and I watch my kids, I mean, they just watch stuff what they want on phones. And they like to watch things that are short. Whereas I remember as a kid, it was like we have to watch show at predetermined times, at predetermined lengths, and it was much more structured because that's how it was presented to you. Whereas now it's more fluid, where you can, obviously you can binge shows or read comics digitally in mass formats, or say, hey, I'm going to get the Marvel online comic thing and have access to every Marvel book ever made. And it's so much, and it's so different, and it's so fluid that even how we consume things has changed radically along with the prices and availability of things. So, to say I'm a comic book fan, I mean, the first shows I remember going to were in York, Pennsylvania, similar to what you're describing, at kind of a Holiday Inn type hotel. And they were pretty much just like, hey, long boxes of books and wall books. And I remember I was so excited because at one of the shows, Joe Monks from Cry for Dawn that he was doing with Joe Linsner at the time was actually at a show. And that was the only time I'd ever seen a writer or artist at any of these shows. And he was like, buy my book. I have a book.
The comic book industry has changed so much, especially with the big two. I remember how excited I was when I got issue 300 of Amazing Spider-Man, and that was the first time you saw Venom. You got the peak of him in the issues previous, but it was issue 300. It was such a big deal. Now, the philosophy has changed so much where once you get to 12 or 18 issues, that's due for a reboot. That's due for a new number one. And I understand the idea that number one issues sell a lot, but when there's been so many and when you're rebooting and rebooting and rebooting, you don't have that feeling of accomplishment. It never gets to those big centennial marks. It makes you feel like there's no history. And also it could just be confusing. If you try to go through like a back issue bin, it's like, okay, well, here's issue 18 of Wolverine. There's been 20 Wolverine series. I don't know where this falls into what I'm looking for.
If you look back to at least when I was reading a lot of Marvel in the 80s and 90s, there was still an attempt, I think, by the publishers to make sense of those titles, like where they had the Marvel A to Z guidebooks. And I remember there was a 4-part Spider-Man miniseries trying to put all of Spider-Man history into like some organized focus. You kind of start realizing these things are they're just so big anymore that like there is no sense to them because it's just an endless stream of material. That excitement about, wow, I'm here for issue 200 of Captain America or whatever the case may be, Spider-Man 300. Yeah, that's from a different, slower era. We'll wait to get to that milestone. It's just changed. It's just how we consume everything. I mean, you're obviously old enough to remember some of these big TV things, like the last episode of Cheers. Where like the entire country watched it. And you watched it because there was only so many TV shows. The entire country collectively enjoyed Cheers at the same time. Thursday at 9, the entire country is going to, 90 million people are going to watch Cheers, and we can't pause it. It'll be on at this time. You can't rewatch it later. Once it's off, and we'll have to talk about it. Now it's like we'll just watch clips on YouTube the next day.
Cheers, MASH. I think the last time that really happened, I guess when Friends ended. And that was really the last gasp of that. And you have very popular shows, but the audience is so fragmented. Also, I don't know when shows are on anymore. All I know is like by Friday, I'll remind myself, it's like, oh, I didn't watch The Good Fight, or, whatever show I'm following along, I didn't watch it. It's like, oh, I should check, and I'll go on demand, and they're like, okay, there it is, and I'll watch it. You'll have those shows where sometimes you look it up on whatever streaming service it runs through. It's like, oh, there was 3 episodes I missed. And you do lose something with that. On one hand, it's nice because your life can get insane. And it's nice that you don't have to worry about it. But there's something to be said for appointment television.
Yeah, and again, I think the discussion we're having becomes more and more dated. My comic book, Lords of the Cosmos, is retro, and one of the things that we try to celebrate with it is kind of things we remember as kids. So one of the things that's going to be in the new issue is a Saturday morning cartoon advertisement for the Lords of the Cosmos Saturday morning cartoon. And we actually pulled some old comic book ads from network television of, hey, ABC, here's what we've got coming out this fall, kids, on Saturday morning. And I used to live for those stupid ads. I mean, they put them in the newspaper, the comic books, and it was like, oh my God, fall Saturday morning cartoons. Like, what shows will there be? That no longer exists. And I still have fond memories of it, but my kids have zero concept of even what that is because it doesn't exist for them.
I remember vividly they would have primetime specials, like a half hour special program where they would have like some hacky bit with whoever was an NBC star, like Bull from Night Court would do a gag bit, and then it would lead into, oh, and here's a special 2-minute preview of Pandemonium or Smurfs or whatever.
Yeah, because it was like rolling it out. I mean, again, we're describing stuff that again will just become lost in the sea of change because it just has ceased to be with technology. I mean, it's just. I mean, and right now we're seeing with movie theaters where you got to wonder with COVID that in 10 years will movie theaters exist anywhere near the scale that they are now? If you think about how a lot of these places make their nickel, I mean, it's through big tentpole films like Avengers, where they, hey, we're going to show this for 3 weeks, 5 screens, 5 shows a day, pack it full for the first three. And when's that coming back? Will it ever come back? And even if they say it can come back, are people going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go sit in a room with 400 strangers packed in within a couple inches? They may not do it. So it's like, can big budget films exist like Avengers, right, or things like that, in a world where those theaters can't produce butts and seats, so to speak? Like, is that just going to go away? I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Again, when I was growing up, we had one TV. It weighed 500 pounds and had a 15-inch screen.
Yeah.
Well, now, you can get a nice flat screen, a huge flat screen TV, relatively cheap. You can get a good sound system and have a pretty good home viewing experience where you don't have to worry about the people talking in the audience or somebody coughing on your neck or paying God how much money for the crappy popcorn and a watered down soda. And then from the studio's perspective, it'll all depend on, they're going to do this year of Warner Brothers movies being released on HBO Max the same time it's released in theaters. And all that matters to them is how much money they make out of this. And are they going to be able to financially justify Wonder Woman being released on HBO Max as well as in theaters? If they make as much or more money doing that, they're going to keep doing it.
Dennis, and I'm going to destroy his last name, Villanueva, maybe, the fellow that made the new Dune movie. And Dennis, I think, is what you would really call a true artist filmmaker. Like, he seems to actually really be into making movies. And he really blasted that decision. He was really vocal about the theater experience. And I thought about that, and it's interesting because I had mixed feelings. Like, I think we do have kind of this fantasy of going to the movies, but it seems like every time that I've gone that I can remember recently, well, I take that back. Going to see a lot of the films I usually like to go see films like Midsummer when they were in theaters, like on a Sunday afternoon when there's nobody there. But so many movie memories I have are just idiots on their cell phone, people talking, and it irritates me so much that it's like, yes, if I could go to Alamo Drafthouse with actual movie fans and say, hey, we're gonna go watch Akira with 200 people that appreciate movies and aren't idiots on their phone the entire time, I could kind of get it. But the film going audience is such annoying levels of rudeness that I get what he's saying, but it's almost like that's nice in theory, right? But movie crowds are just, boy, they're just they're annoying.
It has to be one. There's two ends of the spectrum where it really works. Sort of what you're talking to. I've done it 1,000 times where there's a second run movie theater. I'll go see John Wick after it's been out for 11 weeks, and I'll have a row to myself, and I pay $4, $2 to $4 for a movie ticket. And if I spend $10, I'll get like Twizzlers and a soda, and I'm by myself, and that's really nice. That's great because you get the movie experience, but you're not going to have anyone irritating you. The opposite is if you go and see Avengers Endgame opening weekend, where the audience is into it and they're reacting and they're cheering. I mean, one of my favorite movie going experiences in the last 10 years was when I went to see Black Panther, of which a movie I am not as big a fan of as a lot of people are. I thought Black Panther was fine. I didn't love it. It's not my favorite Marvel movie. But I tell you what, I just remember a group of people dressed in Wakanda garb getting together and having their picture taken by the big stand-up poster yelling Wakanda forever. And it was a really cool experience because people were so excited about that movie. So it's like one or the other. It's like either I want to be there by myself or I want to be with a crowd that's really excited for it, where it almost has like a sports feel.
Right. I mean, you're breaking the fourth wall. Like to your Wakanda example, like the people are there, they're living it, they're breathing it, they're adding to the experience. They're not jerk on a cell phone.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're like, that's annoying.
A lifetime ago, me and a buddy, we were hanging out. There's nothing to do. And it's like, well, why don't we go see movies? So we went to a movie, and all that was in the theater, the starting time matched up with some really crappy Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where it was that period right before he went direct to DVD.
Okay. Time Cop?
Yeah, like post-Time Cop.
Okay.
Completely running out of steam, but there was enough people there, and I remember two guys halfway up from the screen from us, they got into a fight because apparently they just thought it would be a good idea to get into a fight before a Van Damme movie. One guy tried to kick the other over his seat. I was like, oh, okay. That's the sort of a-holes we're dealing with.
I'll take them over cell phone. Cell phones are great, but man, cell phones at movie theaters are just it's to quote Better Call Saul, it's giving a machine gun to a chimp. People can't control their cell phones, and it's just I don't know if you caught the Better Call Saul reference. That's yeah, giving a chimp a machine gun is what you're like, but no, it's the cell phones. Like, could you just please turn them off? And it's just it can't do it, and it's so obnoxious. It literally drives me crazy.
Well, I remember the show how long ago it was. I had a cell phone, but I never used it because it was at a point where texting wasn't really popular, and I didn't have a texting plan. The woman who was selling me like my updated phone, like my StarTAC, well, don't you want texting? It's like, no, I don't need texting. It's like, well, what if somebody needs to get a hold of you while you're at a movie? I was like, okay, it's not Dr. Mendenhall. During the movie, I just turned this thing off.
Yeah. But we've changed. I mean, I graduated college in 1997, and the senior year of college for me, one of my fraternity brothers was like, hey, do you want to get email? And I was like, what is email? And he's like, you can send notes from a computer to another computer. And this was 96, 97. And I was like, well, who would want that? And he goes, it's neat, but you got to go to this building and sign up, and then they'll issue an account. And I was like, I don't want that. That's dumb. And then I remember I was in a class in my marketing degree, and a young woman raised her hand, and this was spring 97. And she said, hey, Professor Harris, could I use a website for a source in my paper? And he was like, no. He goes, that's BS. Use a book. We're not using something on a computer. And those stories sound so antiquated, like it's great grandpa. That's the 90s. It's like that was my higher education experience of like, what is the email? And what website? We're not using that computer. Riffraff? I mean, like, what? And
leave me with my abacus. We're going to do this ourselves.
You're going to get a microfiche of a printed book. And this was higher education in 1997.
My first email I ever received, a school email address. You had to go to the $sign on and type in mail.lockhaven.whatever. And it was a real arduous process. I opened up my first email, and it was somebody who I barely knew in my circle of friends. He saw that I was hanging out with a girl that he liked and went into way too graphic detail about the physical reactions he had whenever he like made physical contact with her. I was like, what the hell?
Well, welcome to your email.
So I like swore off email for a year after that. It's like, okay, email is just where people feel way too comfortable about sharing stuff that they wouldn't say to you face to face, which honestly, not an incorrect judgment.
I saw a joke, and I think I saw it on Facebook, and it made me giggle, where it was like 1990s. Parents say, don't trust anyone on the internet. And then it was like 2020. Patriot.com says the earth is flat, conspiracy. And it was just like, oh my God. It's so different. And I guess this whole conversation is just about change. Man, you feel older the more the stuff changes. The older we get, man, the more staggering it gets. I mean, I'm a huge anime fan, and Danny is one of the folks that works on Lords of the Cosmos, and she's done coloring and graphic work for me for years now. And she's a lovely person. For a couple years, she's been nudging me to watch She-Ra, right, on Netflix. And we spoke the other day, and she said, "You really got to watch this, Jason." Every time I've been looking at it, I think of you and Lords of the Cosmos and all that. So I have since then, in the last week, I've watched season 1 of She-Ra, which is interesting because that's got a lot going on, because it's obviously an updated version of a very 80s property, She-Ra. It's done in a radically different style. It's not syndicated, it's streaming. So it's a completely updated version of something very old, but it's also very anime influenced. So I appreciate the change from the 80s filmation style to their like pseudo anime style. But then I realized too, from watching it, I'm like, it's a lot like Steven Universe, and even how much anime has changed, because as an anime fan in the 80s and 90s, it was very macho, dude oriented, very realistic fighting. And, anime as a fan, and I always feel like the oldest fan in the room with anime people, it's made a very shift towards more diversification, less angry, hard-edged, testosterone-fueled stuff, to kind of more of a, I don't know, kind of a more feel-good, kind of chill, happy mode. And I had to kind of just open my mind a little bit to appreciate it. But crazy thing was, I quite enjoyed it, even though I realized it wasn't the He-Man, She-Ra stuff that I knew, and I also knew that it really wasn't the anime that I grew up on. But it was cool. I enjoyed watching it. I'm going to finish watching the series. I think they're doing some cool stuff with it. I guess it's over now. I guess they did 5 seasons, and I'm like, oh, I missed it. It's very interesting to kind of just recognize, as a fan of anime. I've been rewatching some re-releases of old titles like Angel Cop and Midnight Eye Goku, and man, I mean, watching little behind the scenes vignettes that have been restored, where it's middle-aged Japanese men drinking cocktails and smoking cigars with women with bikinis on their laps, are the directors and producers of these films. And they're like, we want violence and girls in bikinis in our anime. Ha 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 ha. And that was anime. That was a big chunk of fandom. And like, that part of fandom is, for better or for worse, I don't really think it's even there anymore. It's completely morphed over the years.
Change can be great. I know a lot of the entertainment that I really enjoy now in television programming, there would have been no place for it 20 years ago. I love Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty couldn't exist in the 80s. You can't have something that daring and that vulgar and that smart on network TV.
Nope. And I love Rick and Morty. Shame on me, I'm late to the Rick and Morty game. My friend Stephanie, who did a lot of comic shows with me over the years, helping me out at my booths and tables for years, has been harassing me to watch Rick and Morty. And I was like, nah, it looks dumb. And my kids started talking about it. So while we were kind of locked down last spring, I bought season 1 on a lark and watched it with my kids. And I was like, yeah, this is really good. I actually ended up catching up with the whole series, and then I had to write Stephanie an apology note saying that I was an idiot, and why didn't she harass me harder to watch it? But yeah, I'm blown away with how cool Rick and Morty is. And it's kind of weird because I kind of caught up after all the fan scandals and everything else with like the Szechuan sauce and all this stuff. And it was kind of weird catching up with it after all the hype had died down. But yeah, that couldn't have existed 20 years ago at all. No.
You get a lot of variety and a lot of very good variety. You're not going to have 90 million people watching the last episode of MASH or Cheers anymore. You just don't get those cultural touchstone, everybody watches it shows. Instead, you get everything that's become a cult favorite. Instead of 80 million people, everyone loves it, you're going to have 5 million people really love one thing. That works for me because, hell, I'm a Mandalorian fan. And I don't think Mandalorian could have existed 20 years ago because they do some really interesting, daring stuff. It's like, okay, the star of the show, you're not going to see his face most of the time. And there are only 10 episodes per season. WandaVision's going to happen.
Yeah.
Jason, you remember how much effort they had to go through to get a Batman movie and how many go-arounds they had before they could finally get a Spider-Man movie. If a character wasn't as big and as popular as Superman, Batman, or Spider-Man, you weren't going to get a movie made. And there wasn't going to be a TV show featuring two Marvel Avengers characters that never ranked having their own regular series. But they're going to have this pretty big budget Disney Plus TV show. And it looks really inventive and really weird. And, maybe it might be terrible, but they're able to give it a go, and that wouldn't have appeared between the Cosby Show and Seinfeld.
If you look at comics, right, kind of going back to comics and thinking about how that's changed. If you look at comics from what we were talking about, days of yore, it was like there was Marvel, DC, and there was a handful of like Cerberus grew from Epic. Judge Dredd 2000 AD, Dark Horse was kind of lurking around, and there was very little. If you look at comic books today, I mean, obviously we still have our big tentpole hitters, but I mean, hey, look, I'm on my press junket, so I got to promote books, but and Kickstarters, right? But at this point, you look at the decade we've been through, the last decade of crowdfunding becoming ubiquitous with small comics and projects, creative projects, like board games, comic books. It's like, I have an idea. I want to make things. And the technology exists with high-end boutique printing, 3D printing and manufacturing to say, hey, I want to make something really cool. I might make 200 of them, and it'll be pretty damn quality. And if it's a good idea, people can go get it to the point that you can say, I want to make my own comic project, board game. You're empowered if your idea is good enough to get people to give you money to do it. So now it's kind of like a modern, Tower of Babylon, where did I make the right Bible reference to Tower, where everyone had a voice and it crashed? But yeah, but everyone can kind of do their own thing and say, hey, I have an idea too. And there's so much that it's like it's an embarrassment of riches creatively for everyone just to see. There's so much good stuff.
Speaking of Kickstarter campaigns and really cool independent comics, that's why you're back. I mean, I'll have you back anytime, you know that, but you have your own Kickstarter campaign starting. Please share.
January 23rd, Lords of the Cosmos 4 will be joining us on Kickstarter. So this is the fourth book in the Lords of the Cosmos series. And we tried to make it bigger and more grandiose than the first three. We've got an animated trailer, Saturday morning cartoon ad, more toys in the back of the book. We've got kaiju, we've got cyborgs, we've got interconnected plot, we've got villains trying to kill one another. We've got backers in the book as characters doing things. It's just more in-your-face 1980s cartoon toy-inspired anthology mayhem. 4 stories in issue 4, man. For the people that have read the other books, it's just more of the same, and we tried to amp it up. If you've never heard of it or never seen it, one of the reviewers said it was like if Timothy Leary put He-Man and the Masters of the Universe together. So it has that overbearing 1980s swashbuckling, in-your-face, magic robots, talking animals, bigger-than-life everything. One of the really cool scenes is a turtle that's the size of a battleship shelling a beach while robots and werewolves offload out of gigantic crocodiles that are landing craft to attack robots, cyborgs, and zombie shock troops on a beach, like Saving Private Ryan.
The series is so inventive, so smart. great character designs. You have a cyborg evil unicorn. What more do people want?
In this issue, we introduce a new character, the angry talking magic sword for the good guys that hates everyone.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it just shows up, and he's like, I used to be made out of minerals and metal, and I was mined from the earth. And he discusses being molded into a sword and how he didn't like the first person that had him, and he tripped him, so the guy fell on him and stabbed himself and died because he wanted to upgrade owners. The talking cyborg unicorn is in this. He has a main role. He screws up the beach defense where the gigantic turtle attacks the beach. It causes the genesis of Mordantix, who is a 12-foot tall cyborg acid tank that has to kill people to live. It's an incredibly convoluted origin story with all these characters, but he's back in it, and he's back in the main story, humbled after getting shot and almost killed in the prior issue. And he gets dragged before the leader of the villains, Umex, and there's a reckoning with him and the other villains because he failed. So yes, Cycorn has a big reappearance in this book. It's great stuff.
What I love so much about Lords of the Cosmos is you take all the tropes and you just turn everything on its head, or you take that extra little step. I mean, magic swords and intelligent swords have been there since King Arthur and the Sword of the Stone. Take the concept of that intelligent weapon and let's just tweak it and let's make it kind of a dick. My daughter is heavily into her unicorn phase, but tweak it, make it ugly, make it creepy. You have so many of those left turns in the character designs, which I know allows you so many great variances and new directions in the storytelling. And you have great storytelling because everyone's obviously on board that you guys are fans of 80s cartoons, the after school stuff. So you lean into that, but that isn't the story you're telling. You're not telling you're telling something inspired by, but you're giving it like that great, wonderful, dark twist to it. It's so much fun to hear you guys still having fun with the twists.
It has been a lot of fun, and it's fun to keep plucking these characters and spotlighting them. We finally, introduced the main hero at the last page of the last book in issue 3. And this one we start learning more about him, how he had a brother, and his brother got killed by Umex, and the talking sword has been exiled to a vault a mile underground because the sword was involved with so much mayhem in this prior war. We try to make it so the more you read, the more we're rewarding the readers with kind of a more and more rich and complex world. There's a talking cat that's introduced in the last issue. We get the talking cat's origin with a techno wizard, right? So like their origins in the book. So that's called Last of My Kind, where it's the last of the talking cats and the last of the techno wizards. Then we have the origin of the talking sword. We have Mordanix's origin, which ties into this crazy, again, we had this vision of what if the Lords of the Cosmos were involved with saving Private Ryan? Because a lot of us, we just, on the book, we love Saving Private Ryan, especially the beginning where the GIs storm Normandy Beach. And it's so violent and it's so intense and it's very serious, with American and German troops. It's a killing field, but it's very real. But we were like, what would that be like if it was our character? So there was a concept artist, there is a concept artist named Alex J. From England. And Alex took some of my notes and made a really high-end digital painting of what this would look like. And the art is insane. It's high-end pro work. And it's literally robots, werewolves, Aegis, who's like the Greek god, storming the beach out of gigantic crocodile landing craft with Iron Shell, the turtle battleship, like floating out at sea, shelling the beach. And these weird creatures are running up through tank traps with like huge plumes of explosions. Alex worked on that for a couple months on and off. And when we finally came into the final product, I'm like, this is Lord, like, this is it. This is what we want people to see in our heads, is something that if you dig that crazy 80s scene, this is something that is inspired by, but you've never seen this. It's exciting stuff. We have the main story where the villains keep amping up the mayhem on planet Aiden. They're sieging the main capital city where the king and queen are begging for help, and they're being jammed electronically, and Umex ends the electronic blocking of signals because he wants to draw the Lords of the Cosmos out. He's got a trap in mind for them. And there's a lot of drama in and around that. So, I mean, it's a jam-packed book. It's over 40 pages of story. We're going to have a letters page in this issue. We really talked about having a letters page. Like, again, because we love the old Stan Soapbox Marvel letter pages.
You miss that so much. And it's something that you would go to the end of the comic, and the responses were always so great. And Stan Lee was fantastic with that. And it's something that got lost with the internet, where all of a sudden it's like you would go to the website instead, and so a little lost for that.
You miss having that goofy letters page experience. Now, here's the sad truth. So we made an ad to say, hey, get your letter in the next issue of Lords of the Cosmos. And we made an email up just to do it. No one has sent in a letter yet. We've been begging for, no one will write us a letter. We've asked our backers, we've asked fans of the book, and they're like, I'll try to. I'm like, okay. But no one has written us a letter yet, Brad.
Oh, that sucks. Need letters.
I know. Yeah, where are the letters? Come on.
Well, you know what? Because people aren't used to doing that.
They'll put out a tweet. They'll put out something on Instagram, Facebook, but they won't send us a note. So it's very, very interesting. So, I mean, again, we really just wanted to give people more of the same. Kind of realize at this point with the publication of this issue, we're going to have like 100. There's over 170 pages of Lords of the Cosmos book. I mean, it's getting to be thick, and we're actually getting ready to really move into issue 5. Issue 5 is probably half done at this point. So we're rolling on issue 5 at this point. That's where we're at.
You guys have sort of been one issue a year.
That seems to be about our pace. I mean, with work and kids and everything else, that seems to be about what we can actually get done. It's just one of those things. It's without having a full-time focus, it just has to take the time that you can give it. You know what I mean? It just, even if you're caught behind the 8 ball, it's like try to get something done to keep the ball moving forward. That's really kind of the mantra that we've had with it. Just keep moving it forward. Don't quit. Right? You can slow down, but you can't quit.
Does living in COVID world, does that speed things up or does it slow it down?
Wow, that's a great question. On the one hand, it speeded things up because there's so much less going on. Like, I don't go anywhere anymore. There's no vacations. There's no comic shows. There's no little trips. There's no concerts. I'd love to go see heavy metal shows. But in the same token, kids are on remote school. So I'm watching a kindergarten while I'm trying to do my full-time job. And then I'm working in the evenings to catch up from what I couldn't get done during the day. In some respects, it's speeded things up. I mean, because issue 3 got put out during COVID. Issue 3 was wrapped and shipped in like May and June of 2020. So that was done during lockdown. So, I mean, that was getting done. So, I mean, I would say it's kind of a push because for all the, hey, we made up time, it's like, and now there's other problems. It's like you're getting something and you're having something taken away. The personal art projects I've been working on during COVID, because I've had a lot of downtime, is to take the time to do some really big personal projects, like physically big ones, because why not? I did a gigantic 34-inch by 33-inch poster of my favorite Bible character, the Whore of Babylon, for the Book of Revelation, which I've wanted to do for years. And that took me 2 months over the summer. And right now I'm in the midst of doing another 33 by 34 mega poster of one of my favorite books, Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince, which is drawing popes and lords and ladies and castles and knights. And it's just these massive posters that I've had in the back of my head for a while. I did a couple H.P. Lovecraft posters that I've wanted to do this over quarantine. I just wrapped up one based off the book Whisper in the Darkness, where aliens kidnap a farmer, and it looks cooler than it sounds. But just big projects that, you know, again, it's like, so why not? Like, if you want to do big projects when you're home a lot, that's the best time to do them. So, I mean, it's a great question, but I'd say that quarantine has probably kept Lords of the Cosmos about the same. Maybe it should have been speeded up, but it's about the same.
From my own perspective, I was able to get a project that I've had percolating for a long time. I was finally able to get it off the ground because I was able to get some good creatives lined up because, quite frankly, they didn't have anything better to do. And that helped. I've run into the same thing where I've been working from home a lot and the kids have been home a lot. And that makes it challenging. And not even so much like not having the time available, but it's draining. So then, even if I do have the time, just not feeling in the right place to do certain creative things. So, like the project that was able to get off the ground, it's like, okay, I've had this script ready for a long time. I'm going to call A, B, and C, and let's work on the script. So I could, the more part of scheduling worked better, but I haven't been able to come up with anything new and freshly creative because my head's not there. Because I take inspiration from the books I read, from the concerts I go to, from all those things. And I've had so much less interpersonal interaction over the last year.
I will say this. We could have launched the Kickstarter for this exactly 1 year to the date, give or take a few days, that we did the last Lords of the Cosmos Kickstarter, but there was two issues. One, we raced that one out last year to make it so it was live at Baltimore Comic-Con. Well, without Comic-Con, there was no, we need it done by this date. And AJ Nutter has started to do our videos, our little animated, he actually does little bits of animation in them for the Kickstarters, which I think a good video is crucial. And I remember AJ and I were talking about it. We were trying to make the video just right. And I remember he had something going on. He's a personal family friend and he has a life. So he was like, I don't think I can have it done by this date. Could I have some more time to do it right on my schedule? And I remember I said to him, at this point, it doesn't matter. I'd rather you take the extra month and get it the way we want it than race it to get out, because we don't have any dates to hit where it's like, I didn't want to miss the Baltimore crowd, but if there's no crowd, why do I have to hassle this guy to speed up? He had the video pretty much done right before Thanksgiving or around Halloween or something like that. And then I needed to actually make the Kickstarter. And I remember by the time I realized I'd get it done and edited, and those things take time to get them right, where you're always editing them and tweaking them. But to be honest, Brad, it would have been ready to launch too close to the Thanksgiving Christmas holiday window. And I was like, you know what? Let's just shelve this thing till later in January. I mean, and we've been doing minor tweaks to it because we've had the time to tweak this and add a quote and do whatever. I think this Kickstarter is better because we weren't racing to hit a deadline. So, I mean, we really only lost about, 3 months compared to the prior one to keep it on that 1 year cycle. But if it takes 2 or 3 months to get it better, who cares? So I think we took more time, but the Kickstarter itself is probably the best Kickstarter I've ever made. I don't know if you got a chance to really dive into the preview link that I sent you, but there's a ton of effort and work into that with the marketing images and the video and the art in the book.
The video is amazing. The video is so good.
Yeah, I mean, then you know exactly what I was saying when I told him, take your time, dude, because he's like, AJ makes amazing material, like the animated explosions it's great, right?
It is. It's so good. It's professional looking. Hey, you know what? Rough stuff can look good or can be fun, or if it has like a lo-fi thing. But this is your fourth issue, and you have a professional looking book. So you're not trying to put out the vibe of a scrappy kid putting out a rough looking comic. No, you have professional. It's a professional quality comic book, from the writing to the art to everything, top to bottom, to the lettering to how it's put together. So you need a professional looking, high quality video to plug it, and I'll be damned if you don't do it real good.
Thanks. I mean, no, I mean, so here's the thing. I had to just make a decision to say, if it's going to take this man an extra month to get it down tight, then give the man a month. I mean, at this point, what did it matter if he took an extra month? Because we'll probably still put this book out in May or June. We'll make up the little bit of extra time that we killed. And like I said, you have that Thanksgiving Christmas window. I think that's not the best time to put out crowdfunding. So to me, it was like, we got to wait. We got to get past New Year's. And then, I looked at a calendar and said January 23rd. So that's the date. And then I'll launch it on the 23rd and it'll be out. Now, I will tell you this. I am going to take a little pause from Lords of the Cosmos, because for years, and we may or may not have talked about this, I have had a tremendous demand for a satanic coloring book for years. Once Lords 4 wraps, I'm going to do a little detour and knock out this coloring book. and then we'll get back to Lords 5. But the coloring book should be down and dirty and fast to produce. So I've told everyone I'll do 3 and 4, then I got to do my coloring book, and then I'll get back to Lords 5. So yeah, that'll screw up our schedule a tad, but not too much.
Well, and it's something you've wanted to do for a long time. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. A lot of people, and it'll be a great bachelor party gift.
I realize that it'll take very little effort to build the Kickstarter. It's going to be like 2 tiers. It's going to be very simplistic. It'll probably be the biggest Kickstarter I've ever did because I think that one will catch fire because there's kind of a gimmick element to it. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And sometimes, to be honest, it's nice to cleanse the palate and do something different. And as much as I like my robot Greek goddess comic book mayhem, sometimes you got to take a break and just cleanse the palate, so to speak. And hey, chill, do something different for a minute.
I love music, and I know you're a music guy. You're a music fan as well. One of the things that I always liked is, and some people don't, I always liked it when I found out that the guitarist, singer, drummer, whatever, in whatever band you like, had their side project. Because I always said, that could work really well where, heck, if you're a Rolling Stones fan, you know that Keith Richards was going to go off and do a solo album where he would get a chance to sing, and your hope is that they'll work with new musicians and they'll come back with something different. I always like side projects because you hope if it works well, they'll come back to the fold and they'll be re-inspired. Now, that doesn't always work like that. We're talking not that long after the passing of Eddie Van Halen, and David Lee Roth left Van Halen partially because he went off, did his EP. I'm way oversimplifying, but he liked being on his own so much that he didn't come back to Van Halen. It's more complicated than that, but that was sort of how that narrative happened. But go off and do that other thing. You blow off a little steam. You get to sort of stretch yourself in a different way. And hopefully when you come back, it's hopefully you'll find something you do in your coloring book, some technique or some style or maybe some character, and you can find a way to tweak it and bring it back, something cool back to the main gig.
Funny, my inker and I were talking the other day, and he's been inking my stuff for years now, and he said, Jason, it's funny. He goes, I've inked so much of your stuff, and he goes, you're doing Lovecraft stuff. He goes, you're doing Lords of the Cosmos. He goes, you're doing your dystopian book visions, and he's like, you're doing your weird occult stuff and Satanism, and he goes, I'm starting to feel like there's a real underlying theme to all of it, that it's getting harder and harder to tell it apart. And I was like, I guess you're inside my head now. It just all does spin in this big churn in my head where it's like, I enjoy it all, and I've said this before, and I may have said it on your show, but to me, creatively, it's like rotating crops. I love doing Lords of the Cosmos, and it's so much fun, and then you kind of hit a point where you're like, I need a break, and then I like to do my satanic occult weird stuff, and then I like to do my dystopian book. I'm doing this thing with the Prince, which is a whole thing where I'm researching how knights fought in historical conflicts during the late 1400s with Pope Alexander VI, and watching the Borgias on Netflix to try to get a better feel for it, and reading and understanding and really kind of immersing myself creatively. It's like method acting into that artistic style in that world. I'm trying to understand it and learn it and enrich myself with it. And it's a nice place to go because I've wanted to draw knights and medieval people for years, and I just never have, and now I am. And it's good because it's a fresh thing. But then I like doing my Lovecraft. I like doing my dystopian book stuff. I like doing my comic book stuff. But they all get old. No matter how cool any of the stuff is, they all need a refresh. So that by the time you go to the next thing, you're like, man, I really miss doing my whatever it is because you got sick of it and then you had to put it away for a year or 6 months or whatever. And it keeps me fresh because I like all the stuff that I make, but no matter what it is, I get sick of it.
Years and years and years ago, Tom McFarlane, when they gave him his own Spider-Man series, and he was the writer and artist on that. It was obviously a thing of Tom McFarlane was such a huge deal at the time that they're going to let him do whatever he wants because he was a terrible writer.
Yeah.
But he said, like, his hope with that was, well, I can do whatever I want. So if I get tired of Spider-Man 6 issues in, then I'll bring Thor in for 6 issues as a guest star. And then I'll go back to Spider-Man and hoping that that would be a way to, like, sort of like what you're saying there, keep himself interested by going whatever direction he wanted to. It didn't work real well because I don't think he lasted more than like 9 or 10 issues on that series.
I think he made it to 16 issues, and it's pathetic that I know that, but I think it was in the teens. And I think it ended with a 2-part X-Force crossover.
Right. His last issue, it was Liefeld's last issue on X-Force, and then it was McFarlane's last issue on Spider-Man. And it wasn't a particularly natural crossover, except for those two guys at that point were friends.
And the books were horizontal, not vertical.
Yeah, it was so weird.
Right, but anyway, go ahead. You were saying about how it didn't work, and he left after a little bit.
I mean, it worked for however long it worked, but McFarlane was getting too big to be contained by Marvel. He realized that there was money to be made, and which, hey, McFarlane is a rich man. It's hard to argue with the results, although Spawn obviously never became the iconic character that Spider-Man was. Not that you expect that.
Weird. I remember the hope of a young teenage me hoping that Spawn was going to be the biggest thing ever, and like when he was drawing it for whatever it was, 20 issues, it really did have that magic. And I think Greg Capullo took it over after he left, and I don't know that it ever. He had a cartoon series that was kind of pedestrian, and there was a movie that wasn't really good either, and it's just like you said, it just never quite attain that what's the word, zeitgeist.
It never became iconic.
No,
it was just very obviously a comic book written by an artist. So McFarlane wanted to draw the capes and the chains and the evil clown and all of that. There was stuff he wanted to draw, and he would just try to shoehorn together plot lines to make that happen. So there was never any real. The backstory was always muddled. The powers were always muddled. There was nothing to really grasp onto aside from, hey, those pictures look cool. And I remember the HBO series that you mentioned, which was very daring because it was an R-rated cartoon. So the violence, the language, the sexual content were ramped up in a way that, aside from, I don't know, heavy metal, you had never seen before.
But see, I remember the time I was getting into anime, and there was a lot of that in anime, and I remember what struck me about the Spawn cartoon was the animation quality, in my opinion, was not that good, and I was getting a fix, a straight, high-end, violent, testosterone-fueled robot rage era anime, and I remember seeing the Spawn cartoon and being like, it just wasn't that good to me.
Maybe a little bit of neither fish nor fowl where, yeah, it's too violent. The language is too much for, I don't know, if you're watching Transformers in the afternoon, but it's not going far enough or doing it well enough to lure in somebody who's watching that anime.
Yeah.
And the movie was bad. It made money, but the movie was bad.
But kind of going back to what I was saying, I think McFarlane, I think he likes to do different stuff. And I think a lot of artists, I think, have a similar MO to what I'm saying. You have to change and evolve. I think if all you did was the same thing, you would get sick of it. Even if you're like, man, I love drawing Spawn. McFarlane's moved on. He's got other people drawing it. It's fun creatively to stretch yourself. It's fun to do different stuff. And like I said, right now I'm in the thick of it with this medieval artwork, and it's a lot of research and reference and learning. Wouldn't want to do it all the time, but it's fun to do as like a little excursion. Here's the thing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do 1 or 2 more big posters, and then I'm going to slide back into Lords of the Cosmos 5. By that time, I'll be excited to go back and draw more comic book, science, fantasy, weird stuff versus big posters, which I like doing my big posters. So, I mean, like I said, to me, it's hey, all simplified. Everyone, I'm sure you like pizza. Would you want to eat pizza every day?
No, you get tired of it. It doesn't take too long to get tired of it.
Yeah, but you know what? You love pizza because you don't have it every day. When you have it, it should be a treat. Like, hey, we got pizza. Hey, we got Chinese. You know what I mean? Hey, we got Mexican. Hey, we got barbecue. Like, but if you had any of those things all the time, and I like all of them, to me, part of the fun of having those things is that you don't have them all the time.
Exactly. Having the variety, giving yourself a chance to stretch, and it's good for you as the producer, and it's also good for the people who are fans. And I know I've seen the people at the Comic-Cons. Your work brings them in, and I've said this to you before, Jason. You're always So great to talk to at Comic Cons. Once the world comes back to normal, Jason is fantastic to talk to. You take time. You're always engaging and gracious with your time. And not everyone is at Comic Cons.
Let me just say this. Speaking of variety, and I want to throw a plug. So we have 4 stories in the book. I did the art for the main story. Joe Freistuhler, who's done work on the book before, comes back for the Last of My Kind, which he wrote and drew. And then Zach Bruner, who did the Cycorn origin story in issue 1, comes back to do the Talking Sword story. But we got to add a new artist from Italy that I was a huge fan. Well, I still am a huge fan of his art on Instagram. And he posted some sample pages, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's awesome. And I wrote him a note and said, could you work for us to do this crazy beach assault story? And he signed on to do it. And his artwork is out of sight. It's a super talented mix. So, even kind of talking about variety and different stuff, for me, it's fun getting different creative people, which it gives the books a lot of visual diversity. But one of the other things that it does for me, besides drooling over amazing artists drawing these characters from my books, it helps me not be spread too thin where these things can get done and be thick books. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a win-win-win. And Sasha's art, and there's a couple sample pages of it up on the Kickstarter, the one big pinup of the turtle battleship. He's an amazing artist, so I hope people get to discover this guy because he's a freaking star. And we actually have his original pages. They're in my office in my Lords of the Cosmos secret vault, all the way from Italy. He sent them over, so they actually are available to get some of his original work through the Kickstarter for a pretty reasonable price. I think we have them as like $75 a page. For sure, it's like I said, it's fun to mix it up for myself, but it's fun to get other people involved. Just again, the more diverse the book is, the better, in my opinion.
Well, Jason, it's always great talking with you. We've been going back and forth for quite a while. God, this is, I think, maybe your 4th time on the show.
How long have you been doing your show? How long has the Cosmic Geppetto been going on now? Years of service.
5 years now.
Wow, that's a mark, man. Because I think a lot of people can get into this stuff and then they quit.
It's not easy, and I'm sure that you've run into with what you're doing, where you can get frustrated, and you're doing it out of love. Part of the reason why I've kept doing it is, quite frankly, I just really like talking to the guests. One of my things has always been, I've never gone for the quote unquote big names in any way, shape, or form. I talk to the musicians I want to talk to, the comic book artists I want to talk to, the writers, whoever. You're one of those people. I've always just had a great time talking with you. I'm so glad that we got to do this again.
Well, man, Brad, I appreciate the kind words, and like I said, kudos to you for 5 years of doing this, because you're right, it's not easy, because it seems easy, like, oh, all you're doing is talking to people, but it's those years of service, the pleasant conversations, the good questions, but doing it year after year, interview after interview, dude, that's a huge challenge, man. So good for you.
Much appreciated. As long as I'm going to do it, you're welcome back.
Yeah.
So please plug your pluggables. Tell people where they can go to support Lords of the Cosmos.
All you got to do is Google, because it's a big link. So I hope you put the link up so they can just click on it. But I'll do my best. So I'm going to have it pinned up on my Twitter. I'm going to have it pinned up on my Facebook art page. And it'll be all over my Instagram starting January 23rd. So Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Lenox, Lenox artist. Facebook, Jason Lenox Illustrator, and then my webpage, which is like a gigantic art vault, is jasonlenox.com. To find Lords of the Cosmos on Kickstarter, I'm sure Brad will be a professional and have that link easy to find. But if you just Google Lords of the Cosmos for Kickstarter, it's going to pop up like crazy. There's all the other Lords of the Cosmoses are on Kickstarter. So if you can use Google and type in Lords of the Cosmos, you'll find it. But like I said, hit at Lenox Artist. I'll have it pinned up to make it easy to find. So Lords of the Cosmos 4 coming to Kickstarter January 23rd, 2021. It's talking swords, turtle battleships, cannibalistic cyborgs, Greek god-type main characters that are lost in thought and hoping to not get into another world war. We've got it for you, man. Talking cats, too, right? So we need talking cats, but it's all there. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited, and I've read the book 80 times, and I've looked at it for a year. To me, I'm so excited for the readers to just see it for the first time, to see the images in the Kickstarter, which I've shared the preview link with a few people. I mean, it's just a punch in the face, man. I just think it's awesome. I wish I could just see it without seeing it, because it's what I want to read, right? So I hope everyone really gets a kick out of it and supports the book. It's going to be awesome, Brad.
We recommend everyone do so. I'm going to be helping you. I'm going to be a supporter because I think you're doing great stuff, and I always have a great time talking with you, Jason. Thank you so much for coming back.
Brad, thanks for having me, man. It's always so cool to catch up with everyone on the media tours, and so many cool podcasters, and you're one of them. And I appreciate having these little virtual homes with you guys to catch up, man. It's like being in a virtual cozy living room. I love it.
That wraps episode 223. Big thanks to Jason Lenox. Heck of a nice guy, and always fun to have him back. Find the link to his Kickstarter on our Facebook page. Also, big thanks to Katie. Always can count on her for the best questions. Speaking of Katie, the next episode of the Cosmic Geppetto podcast, she returns with her husband Ryan to talk about the Super Bowl. Till then, in the words of Jarf Harden,
see you in the funny pages.
Subscribe to the Cosmic Geppetto podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever quality podcasts can be found. Rate and review us while there. Follow us on Twitter at CosmicGPod, and we will follow you back. Unless you're a jerk. We don't follow jerks. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cosmic Geppetto. We love hearing your ideas for upcoming episodes. Email us at cosmicgeppetto@comcast.net.
leave me with my abacus. We're going to do this ourselves.
You lose yourself, no nothing big to say.